This is Plant-Based Briefing, Shear Destruction, Wool, Fashion, and the Biodiversity Crisis. An excerpt from the report by the Center for Biological Diversity and Collective Fashion Justice's CIRCUMFAUNA initiative at biologicaldiversity.org. And I'm Marian Erickson. This is the curated content plant-based podcast where I get permission and narrate a variety of articles on plant-based, compassionate, and eco-friendly living in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. And if you'd like to support the podcast, one of the best ways is by simply sharing it with others. Help others learn and get the messages about plant-based and vegan living. And it's also very helpful if you could leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That helps others potentially decide to listen as well. And I wanted to let you know I've launched a merchandise shop on plantbasedbriefing.com. There are different plant-based and vegan messages on a variety of apparel for all ages. There are stickers and car magnets, aprons, and different kitchen items as well. So please check that out and share that as well if you don't mind at plantbasedbriefing.com. And now back to today's article from the Center for Biological Diversity. They're a nonprofit working to secure a future for all species hovering on the brink of extinction. They do so through science, law, creative media, with a focus on protecting the lands, waters, and climate that the species need to survive. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Shear Destruction, Wool, Fashion, and the Biodiversity Crisis. An excerpt from the report by the Center for Biological Diversity and Collective Fashion Justice's CIRCUMFAUNA initiative at biologicaldiversity.org. Wool is a mass-market commodity that operates stealthily under many layers of mythology, from legends of the Golden Fleece to bucolic images of sheep peacefully grazing in open pastures. Aesthetics often prevail over the hidden reality of wool production, both in the way we view pastures and in the visual and tactile world of fashion. But wool is not a fiber simply provided by nature. It is a scaled product of modern industrial, chemical, ecological, and genetic intervention that's a significant contributor to the climate crisis, land degradation, water use, pollution, and biodiversity loss. While the environmental impacts of the meat industry have gained significant attention, the role of farmed animals used in the fashion industry has not. Even in contexts where sustainability is a central focus, farmed animal production is often omitted from the conversation, or worse, greenwashed. Farmed animals and their feed are responsible for 16.5% of greenhouse gas emissions and consume almost 1/3 of all fresh water. Animal agriculture is the leading cause of water pollution and habitat destruction, which in turn is the leading cause of species extinction. Yet a primary animal product like wool, the leading global source of animal fiber, has evaded data-driven critique in and out of critical fashion discourse. Despite industry claims of sustainability, there is no centralized data to track, report, or evaluate the impact of wool on land, water, climate, and biodiversity. For this report, we looked at available data from the Higg Material Sustainability Index, MSI, Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Australian and U.S. government agency reports, industry sources, and scientific papers to evaluate the environmental impact of wool. The wool industry has successfully promoted a false perception of fabric made from sheep hair as natural, traditional, and sustainable. Woolmark, an organization representing 60,000 Australian wool growers, calls wool, quote, a friend to the environment. In 2020, the Prince of Wales, a patron to the Campaign for Wool, stated that wool's sustainable and biodegradable properties provide a unique natural option for us all to reassess for environmental values and purchases. But the reality of this global industry is much darker. Before shearing, sheep must be selectively bred, raised, fed, watered, treated, tracked, and measured. Contrary to popular belief, they don't simply live out their lives in pastures, occasionally shorn until they die of old age. As discussed later in this report, wool is a slaughter industry, working hand in hand with the meat industry. And after shearing, wool must be heavily processed before it can be used as fabric. Wool clothing comes with a heavy price tag of greenhouse gas emissions, land use, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Compared to other materials used in similar types of knitwear, thermal layers, and suits, The climate cost of sheep's wool is 3 times greater than acrylic and more than 5 times greater than conventionally grown cotton. Moving away from wool toward materials that are better for the planet and biodiversity can help companies meet the growing consumer demand for more environmentally responsible products. Positive consumer attitudes toward innovative and sustainable fabrics are surging. A 2020 McKinsey survey about sustainability in fashion found that 2/3 of respondents believe it's important for the fashion industry to limit impacts on climate change, and 88% believe the industry should pay more attention to reducing pollution. In 2020, biodiversity was named, quote, the next frontier in sustainable fashion. But an honest conversation about sustainability, circularity, and ethics in fashion is impossible without confronting the impacts of wool on wildlife and the environment. In this report, we cut through the industry-funded mythology, using data to assess the ecological impacts of wool throughout the supply chain, from grazing to scouring. We'll also discuss the way forward for the fashion industry with truly sustainable materials that allow nature to flourish. You just listened to Shear Destruction, Wool, Fashion, and the Biodiversity Crisis, an excerpt from the report by the Center for Biological Diversity and Collective Fashion Justice's CIRCUMFAUNA initiative at biologicaldiversity.org. And I'm Marian Erickson, and this is Plant-Based Briefing. And this report has a lot of really good, really interesting information. I'm going to continue to read excerpts from it, but I'm going to spread them out so it's not all wool for a week or two, just to make sure there's still a variety. And you may have heard some previous episodes about wool, and I usually tie them into the fact that tennis balls are made of wool. And you can check out episodes 72, 146, and 151. And PETA has created an action alert for people who want to send a quick email to Wilson Sporting Goods to request them to make vegan tennis balls. Just takes a couple of seconds, and it sends an email to Wilson on your behalf. You can find that action alert at sheeps.tennis. Thank you for doing that, and please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.